welcome to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. My guest this evening is Representative Joe Courtney. Representative Courtney, how are you?
Good, Peter.
Good to see you again.
Doing this for a long time.
I know, it's been
back.
It's been a while. It's been a while. So how things going down in Washington?
Well, I mean, as I think the whole country, knows. I mean, it's a pretty tough place these days.
Yeah.
Just last week we voted to do a short-term budget that keeps the lights on till after the election, December 9th. And,
Okay.
There was some money that was put in for Zika funding, which is definitely a huge public health crisis right now, as that infectious disease has sort of spread north, and that was good to get that in place. But obviously, a lot of issues are really kind of put on hold till after the election, and in the meantime, and we still stay focused on issues that matter to the district here, and I know we'll talk about some of them this evening.
I was going to say, what besides what we're going to talk about tonight, are there any other hot topic issues that affect the district?
Well, again, the 10 years ago when I was on this program, the workforce at Electric Boat total was roughly about 9,000. I've been on the Sea Power subcommittee for the last 10 years.
Sure.
I'm now the ranking member, and that's the committee that every year writes the Navy shipbuilding plan. It's part of the defense authorization bill.
Okay.
We started, again, in my first term in Congress, to jumpstart production levels for submarines, which, it's a 5-year process to build them. And so, there's a bit of a long lead time, but we are now at a place where the employment levels are up to 14,000.
Okay, sure.
The Electric Boat in January last year announced that they were going to be adding 1,500 hires in Connecticut, and they've been, doing that steadily over the course of 2016. I checked the website this morning. There's 84 job openings, and again, it's of whether it's metal trades, design, engineering, even sort of inside work in terms of just running the interior of the company. And again, they're in the midst of the largest shipbuilding contract in American history, the Virginia-class program, 2 subs a year. First Lady Michelle Obama will be in Groton at the end of this month for the commissioning of the USS Illinois. She's the sponsor of the boat.
Yes, she is. That's right.
And but on deck at EB right now is the USS South Dakota, the USS Colorado, and the USS Vermont. The Montpelier just came in to do a major overhaul.
Wow.
So the work is coming in very strong. And on top of that is a new class of submarines, different than the Virginia class, called the Columbia class. They're to replace the fleet that patrols the oceans with the ballistic sub program. And this is actually going to be even more work. A Columbia class sub is 2.5 times the size of a Virginia class sub. So
really? Wow.
it's a really incredibly large undertaking. And so when you look at the workforce, we're going to go from 14,000 to 18,000 as the Columbia program kicks in. The CEO of Electric Boat, Jeff Geiger, said, well, if you step back and look at those numbers, you think, well, that means we have to hire 4,000 more people to go from 14 to 18.
Right.
But if you look at the attrition in terms of the aging of the workforce that's down there, he said, actually, it's closer to, we're going to be looking at hiring 14,000 people over the next 10 years to get to that 18,000 number. It's, again, because you're replacing people who are aging out of the workforce. Right. What that means, again, is the other day I was down in New London for a cookout with some folks. A young guy came up to me, he had an Ohio State University T-shirt, and I was like, you don't see many Buckeyes around here. What's up with that? And I said, are you visiting someone? He goes, no, I moved here about 2 or 3 months ago. And I'm like, really? What do you? What's going on? He goes, well, I was hired by EB. I was in the School of Engineering at Ohio State University. EB had reached out to as far as the Midwest to do recruitment because this demand signal for the workforce is that strong. And I mean, I love hearing stories of young people moving to Connecticut. I mean, it's sort of the counter narrative of what everyone else is saying.
Exactly.
And it's showing up in the, there was a planning and zoning meeting in Groton the other night for some new mixed use construction. There's a couple new residential condos and sort of rental units, again, to basically give folks who are moving into this region a place to live. Yeah. And on top of that, you've also got the ripple effect of suppliers. These are the people who feed into the program, that sell everything from piping, tubing, materials, services. There's roughly about 500 plus small businesses in Connecticut that feed into the Virginia class program. Tomorrow morning in Norwich, I'm hosting a supplier conference with the Eastern Manufacturing Alliance. That's a group of small manufacturers who, again, want to learn more about opportunities to be part of this incredibly, huge undertaking that is not a one-year blip.
No.
I mean, we're talking about a construction process that's going to go well into the 2030s.
Wow.
So one of the reasons I'm running again is
Yep.
that, I think I'm very well positioned as the ranking member of this subcommittee to protect all of this progress. Again, I think there's very good strategic reasons why the undersea fleet, both Virginia and Columbia class, are so high on the Navy's pecking order. But at the end of the day, it's not the Navy that authorizes and appropriates programs. It's Congress that does it. And frankly, it's been one of the most gratifying sort of undertakings in the 10 years that I've had the honor to represent this part of Connecticut.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned that there's a suppliers conference tomorrow. I was wondering maybe we can talk a little bit about that, exactly what it is and what's going to happen.
Sure. So again, a lot of businesses who do great work in terms of precision advanced manufacturing, but they're small. They can be as small as 5 to 10 to 15 workshops there. They don't really have the sales force, the consultants that can go out and negotiate contracts. Right. So what a supplier conference does is it sort of brings the customer, the big customer in this case, directly to them face to face. And Blair Decker, who's the VP at EB Electric Boat, who does a lot of the supplier vendor work, is going to actually be there, kind of walk through what's the horizon of the program. The most important thing he's going to do is he's going to give people his email address and phone number and really talk about how they do their selection. Again, you got to be good.
Yeah.
And the Navy is always pushing to have the lowest price possible. But
exactly.
As I said, there's over 500 small businesses in Connecticut that are already doing business with Electric Boat. We want to grow that number some more. So that's why that conference is taking place.
And I guess that you guys, like you said, you're done with session for the year. What was it like?
It had some bright spots. It had obviously some disappointments. We got a couple things done. K through 12 education program, No Child Left Behind, which I think we talked about 10 years ago.
I think so. Well, let's.
Yeah, but you talk to any Board of Ed member, any school superintendent, the No Child Left Behind program, well-intentioned, had a lot of flaws. The high stakes testing, which kind of took over the classroom to an unhealthy degree, and too many mandates out of Washington. So this year we actually did pass a successor program to No Child Left Behind. That's no longer the law, and a new K through 12 bill was passed, Every Student Succeeds, which President Obama signed into law. It basically pushes the decision-making down to the state and local level more than having Washington at the U.S. Department of Education dictate things like school performance. Right. And so as a result, in Hartford right now, they have working groups that are trying to come up with a new system to, again, measure school performance. I mean, I think it's important, given the size of the taxpayer investment, that we get good results. I mean, if we're going to have those designers and engineers and people who can operate precision machine tools, they need a good education, and it starts at the earliest age. But you don't want to have, again, it's kind of a mindless, one-size-fits-all system of doing that. So that was a real positive development that we were able to finally get No Child Left Behind off to the side. I mean, a disappointment is higher ed. 3 years ago, I was in the Oval Office when the president signed the Student Loan Certainty Act, which blocked a doubling of interest rates for the Stafford Student Loan Program that provides assistance for about 15 million college students around the country. It was going to go to 6.8%. Today, a new loan that was taken up for this year was roughly about 3.3%. That saved a lot of money for people in terms of interest payments. But we need to go much deeper in terms of dealing with this issue of higher education affordability. Senator Sanders, during the campaign, did a great job of going to college campuses, raising this issue, and you can debate different prescriptions in terms of doing that, but frankly, just putting the spotlight on it is a way of getting something moving here. And one of the things I think is easy to start is to allow people who are carrying legacy loans from when they graduated maybe a year or two ago, allow them to refinance down those high interest rates to a lower degree. So I'm co-sponsored a bill in the House. Senator Elizabeth Warren has co-sponsored a companion bill in the Senate.
Okay.
It's called the Bank on Students Emergency Refinancing Act.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it kind of got caught in that partisan gridlock. And it's going to probably have to wait till we get a new president and a new Congress. But overnight, we could really put more money in people's pockets who are making these high monthly payments at interest rates that really are totally out of whack with what you get for a house mortgage or for credit cards or car loans. And that really should be kind of an easy one to get both sides to work together.
Exactly. Now, from what you were telling me before we started taping tonight, I guess you guys did something with funding for the Zika.
Yes.
The Zika outbreak. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, this is an infectious disease, which about a year or so ago, I'm not sure anybody even, had heard of it,
Correct.
including myself.
Right. Me too.
Right, and but obviously it's, picked up speed. It was an issue, in Brazil with the Olympics in terms
of course it was.
People having to take extraordinary measures.
Oh, yeah.
But it's kind of marched north. And it's been in the islands. Obviously, the island of Puerto Rico was hard hit by it, and now it's in Florida. And the governor of Florida, Rick Scott, who's a staunch Republican, is seeing the tourism industry, really harmed by the fact that people are afraid to go visit there. It obviously has a catastrophic impact, particularly on pregnant women. And the sort of public health measures that we need to respond to an infectious disease outbreak like this cost money. Right. And the federal government pretty much had run its emergency counts down to zero, and so had the state of Florida. So we did put in emergency funding as part of that short-term budget, so that public health officials can do their job in places like Florida. Frankly, it's going to have impact even as far north as the Northeast for people who have visited down there and been infected. I know one gentleman who served 2 tours in Iraq who was in the islands and came home with a pretty nasty case of Zika. So it's it's hopefully something that we can get our hands on, address it. It's not going to be a recurring expenditure, right. But it's but that's where Congress we took too long to getting that out of the way. I mean, in a different era, whether it was a natural disaster or a disease outbreak, the Congress would have moved much swifter.
All right. Well, Congressman Joe Courtney, would you mind sticking around for another segment?
Sure.
We'll be right back after a short break.
These are the dishes that Sandra gave to Goodwill, where Pete found the job that gave him a sense of purpose. This is the dress and the shirt that Madeline gave to Goodwill, where Graciela learned the English that changed her life. This is the dress, the dishes, and the shirt that David and Jackie found at Goodwill. Goodwill, what goes around comes around.
Every day, the people in our community rally in support of United Way as we strive together to make a big impact to change lives in Middlesex County. From our main streets to our institutions, from our neighborhoods to our town halls and our classrooms, we're working with our partners to create a stronger community. It's an inspiring effort, and we invite you to join us. Volunteer, donate, live united.
And welcome back to this week's edition of the Pete Mezzetti Show. Sitting here with Representative Joe Courtney. Representative Courtney, welcome back.
Absolutely. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So, Representative Courtney, let's talk about an issue that affects this local area that we're sitting in right now, and that would be dredging.
Yep.
Let's talk.
Yeah, dredging may not sound like the most glamorous issue in the world, but
right.
Having said that, you're absolutely right. For a community that is a coastal community in Long Island Sound, particularly on the Connecticut side,
right.
The challenge of trying to keep the channels clear, Cedar Island Marina, which has
right,
just
sure.
a great
absolutely
business and contributes a lot to this region. A number of years ago when I was first elected, the buildup had reached the point where boats were actually avoiding Clinton because in low tide, they pretty much were trapped. And we worked hard with the local officials here and the Army Corps of Engineers to get on the Army Corps list, and worked out a great plan actually where the material was taken further west to Hammonasset Beach, and they used the material, which was very clean but very voluminous here, and moved it to Madison so that they could replenish the beach at Hammonasset. But the thing about this issue is that it never goes away. Mother Nature,
right,
particularly on the Connecticut side, where material comes down with all the great rivers that that flow through our state, it's a never-ending process. And if you look at the total volume, whether it's starting in Stonington, Thames River, Connecticut River, I mean, there's frankly not enough upland disposal sites like Hammonasset Beach to really deal with that material. You've got to do some open water disposal, and so right now the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and the Army Corps, for the last 8 years actually, have been working on coming up with a new dredging plan, a 30-year dredging plan, which sets up very strict ground rules so that no toxic materials or hazardous materials would be contaminating Long Island Sound, but that there would be places where the material could be deposited. They've done a great job. I mean, I've been very close to this process, and they are on the verge of filing the final plan. On the eastern end of Long Island Sound, which is most of my district, they have a site pretty much off New London and Niantic.
Okay.
And again, it's got plenty of capacity to deal with the next 30 years. I mean, to just give you an example,
Sure.
the Navy base in Groton,
Yeah.
subs have got to get up and down the Thames River. That's another river that piles up with dredge material if you don't clean it out on a regular basis.
Right.
And when we had the BRAC, remember that back
Yep,
in 2005,
I
which was
do.
the near-death experience for Connecticut.
Exactly.
One of what the Navy did is they set up a big sort of score sheet, and they looked at different issues like dredging,
Okay.
and gave each sort of Navy base around the country a score. We scored very low in Connecticut because of the fact that our dredging plan was only through, at that point, 2009.
Wow.
And if you're looking at a long-term Navy base,
Yeah.
you've got to have a longer horizon than that. And that's why a 30-year plan will make a huge difference if there is ever another BRAC round in this area here. Because if they ask a question, well, how are you going to keep the Thames River open for submarine traffic? Then we've got a 30-year dredging plan, which was done in 2016.
Correct.
So everyone's been working hard. We came up with the site. About a month and a half ago, Governor Cuomo, out of nowhere, called a press conference and said that he would sue to block opening this site in eastern Long Island Sound, which if you try and sort of ask the next question, well, what are we supposed to do with this material?
Okay.
I mean, his answer was, well, you're going to have to take it either way further west to deposit it at a site which has been opened, or deposit it all upland. Well, it sounds great, except the problem is that adds a cost factor that is like off the charts. And again, the folks in the Clinton Harbor Commission,
Right. Correct.
Westbrook, all the way up the coastline, couldn't believe their ears that the governor would take really such a hostile position to the state of Connecticut. Again, silt does not build up on the New York side of Long Island Sound. It's just the way Mother Nature
Exactly.
is. And, it kind of flows downhill, as I said, through all the Connecticut rivers and watersheds that we have here. So this could be a battle. It's an unfortunate one, and frankly, it's one that the Groton Navy Base is the largest operating military facility in the Northeast.
Right.
Fort Drum and Upper State,
Yep.
New York is probably the biggest, but in terms of New England, certainly, that's the biggest one. And it really puts at risk the long-term viability of that base if they can't get submarines up. And I mean, it's kind of a simple
Right. Exactly.
concept. Is that
Not that hard.
submarines don't, I mean, they can sort of surface, but they have a lot of, need for depth that gets up and down there. So in any case, Governor Malloy has already said, you want to sue, we'll sue back. I mean, the good news is we'll have the federal government on our side with EPA and the Army Corps,
Sure.
and hopefully, you know, somebody will come to their senses over there. That's a big waste of time, and frankly, all it does is endanger. There's about $9 billion of maritime economic activity in Connecticut for, you know, marinas, for I mean, you name it, fishing, commercial fishing, recreational fishing, and you know, but if you do nothing for our waterways in the state in terms of keeping them cleaned out, then I was talking to the harbor master in Niantic the other day. He said at times at low tide you can practically walk across the Niantic River, you know, which is you know how dramatic this problem is in our area here. Again, the folks in this part of Connecticut and Clinton have been terrific in Westbrook in terms of you know, getting the troops out, submitting comments in support of the dredging plan, and you know, at the end of the day, it's just the facts and the law are on our side, and I feel like we're gonna win this. But it's unfortunate, 8 years into the process, that the governor of New York suddenly, you know, threw a monkey wrench in. So anyway,
I was gonna say, what's the next step, or what can be done next?
So the EPA is going to as I said, file the final site, and I think it's going to show that none of the site is in New York waters. It's all in Connecticut waters.
Okay.
And obviously, you know, I think we're really well positioned in terms of demonstrating that anytime there's a proposed dredge, you know, whether it's the Connecticut River or Thames River, you know, there's going to be, you know, really thorough testing of the material to make sure that there's no pollutants or hazardous material. If it is, that material is going to be not allowed to be deposited in open waters. It'll be segregated and disposed of as any hazardous material would be. In a hazardous material site upland, you know, just like it is when you have a brownfield project and you're cleaning out contaminants from you know, whether it was a factory or some other facility there. So in any case, I think we've got a really strong plan. I think we've got both agencies that in the past have sometimes, you know, butted heads, EPA and the Army Corps together, and obviously the state of Connecticut is going to be there very strong to you know, defend what is really, I think, almost an existential issue for the economy along this coastline.
Now, you and I were talking during the break. Let's talk a little bit about workforce development and job growth.
Yep. So, you know, I talked about the EB story the other day. The governor announced that Sikorsky, Lockheed Martin is now making they're going to be part of a 30-year building program for helicopters. Pratt & Whitney said 8,000 new positions for all the engine work that's going to be up there. I mean, if you look at Connecticut right now, we got to get our game up.
Yeah, right.
And so career and technical schools, you know, at high school level, and community colleges. So we just cut a ribbon for a new advanced manufacturing center on Friday up at Quinnebog Valley, up in Killingly there. It's about 10,000 square feet with state-of-the-art machinery that you can train people to do this kind of work, and you know, the EBs started up their apprenticeship program for metal trades, which hadn't been in existence since the 1990s. But the fact is that you know, we add up all those thousands of positions. You throw on top of that all the suppliers that have basically the same workforce need, and as well as non-defense manufacturing. You know, it's a challenge, but you know what? That's a good challenge to have. I mean, that's a real opportunity for the state. Exactly.
And speaking of, I know we talked a little bit about it in the first half, but let's talk about it again. Let's talk about what's going on with Electric Boat and what's going on over there.
Well, as I said, they're in the middle right now of the largest shipbuilding contract in American history with a Virginia-class program. There's going to be a subsequent contract of a similar size, probably sometime in 2018, 2019.
All right.
Again, it's because, you know, if you look at the Navy's laydown of their fleet across the world right now, the demand for submarines, whether it's Asia Pacific or the North Atlantic, is it's absolutely at the top of the list. So that's going to just create a very steady workflow. Again, there's only 2 shipyards in America that can build nuclear-powered vessels. One is here in good old Connecticut, and the other one is at Newport News in Virginia, where they build the aircraft carriers. They do some submarine work, but obviously Groton does exclusively submarines, and that's why we got the other big contract the Columbia class because you know, we built the last class of ballistic subs, and we're going to build the next one.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I didn't know that.
It is, and as I said, you know, the eyes of the country will be on Connecticut at the end of the month when the First Lady's here.
That's right.
And as I said, the backlog of work, and you know, which has been sort of a slow process to build up because shipbuilding is sort of the long game, has finally reached the point now where you know, we've got people coming from Ohio and other parts of the country to you know, build a life.
When they commission a submarine, like when the First Lady's going to be here, what exactly do they do? I've never...
It's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, we should try and help you get a ticket one of these days. So, I mean, so there's 3 things that happen. They do the keel laying. That's when they first lay the material to kick it off. Okay. And they weld your initials in if you're the sponsor of the boat. So she came to the keel laying. Then they do the christening. That's when you smash the
bottle of champagne.
It took her 3 tries, which is it was pretty funny because she got there late, and they usually give you a little kind of how-to. Yeah. So, but the 3rd time when she did it, I think all that Pilates exercise kind of paid off because it's actually screwed into a wire mesh bottle. Oh, and she hit it so hard that the bottom, which had, I mean, you can see the pictures there, the thing just like flying off.
Oh, no.
Yeah, because they want the mesh there so glass doesn't go flying all over the place. And then the commissioning is the 3rd. That's the official sort of handing of title from the shipyard to the Navy, and that means it's passed all the tests. You know, it's been out there doing you know, the angles and dangles and, you know, hitting the gas and going down as far deep as and it passed in flying colors. So it's a very exciting event. At the christening when she spoke, there were probably 8,000 or 9,000 people there, and I'll tell you, she did a great job. The speech was totally focused on the captain and the crew. Okay. You know, there was no politics. There was, you didn't mention her husband, you know, just, it was very focused on, you know, the really special people that make up our you know, our Navy.
Exactly, exactly.
And I had a chance to visit, I went on board the USS Minnesota.
Oh, did you?
About a month or so ago for 2 days, slept on board.
Nice, how was that?
It was great. That's, again, one of the new Virginia class, and it's the first attack sub that has women officers on it, which was pretty, you know, exciting to see that historic change that's happening in the submarine fleet. By the way, it was no big deal. I'm sure you can imagine. The crew was like, so what?
Yeah, exactly.
Just do your job, I'll do my job.
Who cares?
Yeah,
exactly. Well, Congressman Joe Courtney, thank you for coming down.
It's a pleasure,
hopefully we'll have you on again.
Good. I'll come back.
All right. That's it for tonight's show. I'm Pete Mezzetti. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.